Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime. I'm Manny Rodriguez. In today's episode, I want to share with you the story of Sarah Hartsfield, who is now being charged with first-degree murder of her husband who died of poisoning. This is her fifth husband. Before we dive into it, I want to share. If you follow my channel, you've probably noticed I've not been on for a number of weeks. My apology if you follow and you were wondering. I'm changing the channel up a little bit. We're going to have our lives that are going to be more of the current stories that we don't always know the ending. And we're going to have the pre-recorded videos where I will share the full story of what happened in that tragic true crime story. But in today's episode, I want to share with you about Sarah, who is now being held on a $5 million bond, who is accused of poisoning her fifth husband. But she was previously charged with a murder charge with a previous husband. She beat that murder charge. And they said it was self-defense. Now here we are again with another husband who has been killed. And now we're wondering, how'd she get off the first time? Well, they're reopening that case as well. And so I want to dive into this story for you. Let's get into it. So here we have Sarah Hartsfield. As I shared, she is accused of killing her fifth husband. And tragically, this is not the first husband who has lost their life. In December of 2022, Sarah Hartsfield told a friend that her husband in marriage had become a nightmare and that she had a plan to get out. Now, this is according to a private Facebook message with a friend of hers that was provided to NBC News. And so this was actually verified that it was her account that sent these messages with this friend. In a December 19th message, Hartsfield, she called her husband, Joseph Hartsfield, an empty person and derided his financial irresponsibility. That was her thought process when it came to Joseph Hartsfield, her fifth husband. She said in this message, "I've paid for everything to the point I have nothing left." He was just looking for a meal ticket and way back to a lifestyle he could never attain on his own. That is what she wrote in those messages, which again has been confirmed by NBC News, that it came from an account that belonged to Sarah Hartsfield. Now, Hartsfield, she did not give any specific type of plans to her friend and neighbor who wrote that it's now a matter of executing this plan that she had in place to get rid of him. The friend, who of course did not want to be identified for any fear of being publicly linked to Sarah Hartsfield, she said that she thought her friend's message meant she wanted out of her marriage and to get on with her life, not that she was planning to kill Joseph Hartsfield. But this former Army soldier, she has pleaded not guilty in the murder. 5 years before this, she was accused in her husband's death. Again, this was 5 years in 2018 that she was accused in another husband's death. She was trying to get out of the marriage with Joseph Hartsfield, but now this is linking back to a previous marriage with David Bragg. You see, 5 years before this, she was accused in her husband's death. You see, she fatally shot another partner. Authorities in Minnesota determined that she fired in self-defense and that the killing was justified. But days after her February 3rd indictment in the killing of Joseph Hartsfield, authorities said that they had reopened the investigation into the 2018 death of David Bragg. Chambers County Texas Sheriff Brian Hawthorne, he alluded to other episodes in her past, telling NBC affiliate of Houston that she had been married 5 times in relationships that often ended under grim circumstances. Hawthorne, he told the NBC affiliate, everybody wants out of it because they fear for their life. Her first ex-husband, Titus, he said he can't believe that he got out of this marriage. He told NBC News that he was afraid of her while they were married and after their divorce. He said, I'm very surprised I got out of the marriage alive. This home that you are looking at is the home of the current death. This is Titus, the very first man that she married. This is her high school sweetheart. And Titus, just like Joseph Hartsfield, the 5th husband who did die under suspicious illness, they both were scared for their life. And Joseph, he told a family member so, according to Hawthorne, the sheriff, who again declined to comment on these Facebook messages. Hawthorne said in an interview, Sheriff Hawthorne, he said he felt like his wife was trying to kill him. This is in reference to Joseph Hartsfield, adding that Joseph shared a concern with a relative before a nurse summoned deputies to the medical facility east of Houston where he was hospitalized. And in the hospital at the Houston Methodist, at this hospital, this is where he was hospitalized on January 7th with what authorities described as a suspicious illness. He was already brain dead. That's what the search warrant affidavit has shared. He was pronounced dead 11 days later. A cause of death had not been determined. Sarah Hartsfield, again, she is being held in lieu of a $5 million, it's about $4.5 million bond. Sheriff Hawthorne, he said she was placed on suicide watch after her March 1st arraignment. Now, Hartsfield lawyer Keaton Kirkwood, of course, my client maintains her innocence and will assist in the investigation of her husband's untimely death. That is a quote from the lawyer Keaton Kirkwood. Of course, that's what they're always gonna say. And of course, remind the public to withhold any judgment until due process has been satisfied. We get all that, right? But back to the victim in the story that this really is about. Rest in peace, Joseph Hartsfield. Joseph Hartsfield, he was a diabetic. And before he was hospitalized, his blood sugar levels had dropped very low, dangerously low. A search warrant affidavit had showed that it dropped precipitously really fast. Sarah Hartsfield told investigators that she went to get him juice and jam, and that when she returned to their bedroom, he'd vomited on himself. That's according to the affidavit. And Hawthorne said by the time Joseph arrived at Houston Methodist Hospital in Baytown, he was unconscious and in dire straits. And according to the affidavit, a nurse believed there may have been foul play because he was failing to respond to the glucose that medical staff members were pumping into his body. The amount should have been enough to last for hours. That's what the affidavit has shared. In Joseph's case, his blood sugar kept crashing. That's what the affidavit shared. The document says this could be a sign of too much insulin in his system, adding that 8 to 10 insulin pens were found on his side of the couple's bed at their home. Almost like it was injected continuously to have this effect. In the weeks after Joseph Hartsfield's death, Sarah Hartsfield, she posted on Facebook that she felt numb and lost without him, and that she'd listened to old phone messages just to hear his voice. That's what she was sharing. In the weeks after Joseph Hartsfield's death, she was sharing this in order to get attention, to not look suspicious. You know, being that she's numb and lost without him, and that she'd listen to old phone messages just to hear his voice, we've heard that before. She wrote on January 27th, "I guess I'm gonna try to sleep. I can't possibly cry and weep any more than I have this evening. I love you, Joseph Hartsfield." 2 days later, she wrote on the message that as I sit here trying to think of something to be grateful for in the midst of where I am, I'm so glad Joe and I said the things that were said to each other so there'd be no regrets. We didn't have crosswords, no raised voices, no cold shoulder or silent treatment. We were being ourselves, united, figuring it out together. Now, as I shared, she was in the Army. And she was in the service for a little while in the upscale central Texas neighborhood where the friend who provided the Facebook messages lived near Sarah for years. Residents were utterly stunned by these allegations and the murder charge. The neighbor said Sarah Hartsfield had always been very nice, someone who participated in a neighborhood-focused Facebook group and seemed more like a divorced housewife than a soldier. She moved away, got married, and was happily married. That's what the friend had said. She had beautiful wedding pictures. Then he goes to the ICU and never comes out of the ICU. That's what the friend shared. An Army spokeswoman said Sarah Hartsfield, then known as Sarah Donahue, served in the Army for a year in the late 1990s and again for a decade beginning in 2007. She was in the Army Reserve from 1998 to 2007. Initially, she was a motor transport operator, and then she later became an intelligence analyst and deployed to Iraq from November 2007 to August 2008. That is what the spokeswoman had shared. Almost like this is what she was wanting in her life. That's what she was gearing for. That's what she felt at that time she wanted to do. At the end of her service, she held the rank of Sergeant First Class. So she was slowly but climbing the Army ladder. A woman who served with Sarah in Iraq said she was in shock over the arrest. At the time, she was a devoted squad leader, wife, and mother. That's what the woman had shared. And so she was blown away that something like this could happen. Now, we don't really know what the children are sharing about this because Hartsfields, they have adult children and she has adult children. And so one son, I believe, was even spoken out about her. But there were interactions with exes after the divorces. When news about Sarah's arrest it was hardly shocking to her first ex-husband, Titus. Titus, Nor's Corn's child. I'm not too sure how to pronounce that. Excuse me. The two, they had met in a small town Missouri high school in 1991 when Titus was a junior. He had shared this. Now, Titus, as we know, this stuff happens, right? Your first sweetheart is the sweetheart you think the most of, right? They're the only person you ever think of. And so later on, when all this news came out, Titus was blown away. He's like, oh my gosh, I really escaped the hatches. And so Titus, he did an interview and he shared what he thought about this. And he said that while they were splitting up, she appeared to threaten him, alleging that she said, don't be surprised if you don't make it through this. In the decades that followed, she continued to interject herself in his life even after he remarried and had a family. That's what he shared. Now, his wife Angela said she was like a bad penny. Every time you'd turn around, she'd be there. She doesn't do it to confront you. She doesn't do it. She does it to remind you she's there. Now, in a brief interview, her second husband, Michael Traxler, he said that their relationship, it was short, right? It was like super short and in the rear view mirror that fast. And he says, I haven't spoken to her in 15 years. He's keeping his distance from her. He wants nothing to do with her at all, right? Every single one of her exes has found something bad. But here's the thing. 5, right? Married 5 times. Only 3 are surviving. And now 2 are directly linked to her. Because the other one first was, again, she was found to have been in self-defense. So she obviously concocted a great story if truth is she didn't, right? And so here we have another one that's like, I don't want to have anything to do with her. Another husband, Christopher Donahue, which again, when she was in the service, she was as Sarah Donahue, right? And he filed for divorce in 2017 from her. That's exactly what court records are showing. Like, they split in 2017. So he's like, I'm out of here. I want nothing to do with her as well. Again, no one's having a good experience with her. A little over 4 years later, roughly the same time, at roughly the same time that the records show that he requested an order of protection against Sarah. Again, keeps interjecting herself into these people's lives. And so he has this order of protection against Sarah. And federal authorities, they asked a police detective in Sierra Vista, Arizona, to monitor Donahue's home. Right? A Sierra Vista police even shared that is true. Yes, they wanted us to monitor their homes. And so we don't really know much about that episode. The details behind that, they kind of are a little foggy, a little unclear, not really sure. But court officials in Bell County, Texas, they have not provided anything associated with that. So it's a little hard to really get deep into that, right? And so, they said that they was not involved too much and they did not get involved in the FBI probe. So it didn't really get too far when it involved Christopher Donahue. Now, his new wife and Sarah, who again had remarried and was now at that time known, should I say, as Sarah George. And Sarah marries David George. right? So this is where, it gets a little foggy in a lot of things around this, literally. But what we do know is she's really a shady character, and now we want justice because all husbands are saying this lady has problems. Now the detective did carry out a close patrols of the home, as they were asking, hey, go check out what's going on over there, but no criminal charges were ever filed. Now 2 months after, on June 7th, after Donahue had went after this court order, a protection order, a judge granted the protective order. That's according to court records in Bell County. The order did bar Hartsfield from contacting Donahue and their children for 2 years. Now, Kirkwood, Sarah's lawyer, again, she's not sharing anything directly, but she has provided statements to some news outlets. And the lawyer says, we adamantly denounce the misinformation that has been provided to the public regarding her past. So, 5 husbands, 2 dead, 3 have issues. I don't know who's right or wrong here. But allegedly in 2017, when David Bragg met Hartsfield at Fort Hood. Now we know in Fort Hood, Texas, that place is also known to have problems. Literally, there has been a number of soldier deaths there. And so at the end of the day, they're like baggage surrounded with baggage. And so we want justice for the victims. But that's where, at Fort Hood, David Bragg met Sarah Hartsfield. That's where she was stationed, and he was working for a solar company at that time. That's what David Bragg's mother, Laura, has shared. Now, initially, according to Laura, her son was head over heels in love. That's what Laura is sharing, and believed that she was the great love of his life. We looked at it through those lenses because what made him happy made us happy. That's what she said. And Sarah Hartsfield moved to Minnesota and began working on a house with Bragg on a large plot of land in Douglas County, which was about 150 miles northwest of Minneapolis. That's what the friend shared, the friend who provided those Facebook messages that I originally shared at the beginning of this episode. And the friend recalled that Sarah would email her about the home, describing the pantry that she wanted and what color paint she was considering. But after a couple of months, Laura Bragg shared that her family started seeing flaws and cracks. And on May 9, 2018, Sarah Hartsfield fatally shot David Bragg in their home. And Hartsfield, she told investigators that she shot Bragg after he assaulted her and fired a gun at her. That's what Douglas County Attorney Chad Larson said in a 2019 letter. But a forensic analysis of the weapon supported her version of events, as did witness statements. That's what Larson wrote in that letter. The letter does not say who saw the shooting. Under the circumstances, Miss Donahue was justified in shooting Mr. Bragg as a matter of self-defense, as she was facing lethal force and had no reasonable possibility of retreating from the threat. That is what the attorney Chad Larson said in this letter. That's what he said in this letter, which the weapon supported her version of events and allegedly witnessed statements. But after Sarah Hartsfield indictment in Texas in February of this year, 2023, The top prosecutor in Douglas County said an investigation into Bragg's fatal shooting was active again after new information was provided to the sheriff's office. And in a statement, Larson did not offer any type of information to help us understand. His office said that the investigation was still active now after this was done. And now that she's in jail, now they're bringing it back up. Because at the end of the day, we want justice. Now, Bragg's relatives said in a statement that they were relieved that the prosecutor was taking another look at his death. And the statement read, "Almost 5 years ago, our family lost a son, a brother, an uncle, and a father. With very little information regarding his death, we were unable to ever really move forward. All we knew is that the man that was described by his killer was in fact not the David we all knew and loved. His death was very random, and the circumstances that surrounded his death seemed far-fetched and almost made up. We're hopeful that this time around we will be able to have that closure and the knowledge that nobody else will be hurt by this woman." That is a statement from David Bragg. Rest in peace, David Bragg. And the prosecutor, they truly believe they have a case, and they're very confident that they have the woman that is charged in this Texas with killing her husband, and now she is also being looked at again for her previous involvement in the 2018 shooting death of her former partner. And now they can really dig deep after this February 3rd, 2023 indictment of Sarah Hartsfield. Rest in peace to David Bragg, taken from this world way too soon by a selfish person. You know, and you have here someone else who was involved with this sad, tragic surrounding this lady. You see, we don't really know everything we know. There's a lot to this that is going on around this whole story. And if you think about it, it's only just beginning. Because truth is, we still have a trial. We still have a lot to go. But here you have Rebecca Kuntz. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Kunze. And Rebecca is also tied to this story. You see, it wasn't until months after the death of her fifth husband in Texas, again, earlier this year, that officials in Minnesota reopened their investigation into the fire and the death of George's partner. In February, Hartsfield, as I shared, was indicted on a murder charge. And she's being held on almost $5 million bail. And so the investigations into Eagle Bend, Minnesota, this is all in light of new information. Now, this is just, no charges have been filed yet. The sheriff said that his office is just re-examining the January 31st, 2018 death of Rebecca Kuntz, only 62 years old when she was taken from this world way too soon. Rest in peace, Rebecca. And the fire that is associated with this, which was exactly 7 months later at the home of David George, her longtime partner, it has very suspicious circumstances around it. You see, a prosecutor in nearby Douglas County said in February that his office was just re-examining the killing of Hartsfield's fiance, right? The one I shared earlier, after authorities determined that, it was an act of self-defense and justified. But it isn't clear whether this newly reopened case has any connection to the shooting of her fiance. If it has any possible target of the investigation, it's unclear. Now, Kuntz's family has long had questions about her death and its aftermath. Her brother, Dana Kuntz, he was sharing that, citing instances that he described that was out of the ordinary. And he says, I hope to God there's nothing nefarious about this. I'm also a man of reality. I don't just believe in coincidences. It's hard not to look at the whole thing now and not wonder what the HELL really happened. All we want to know is the truth. David George told Dateline that Rebecca Kuntz, who went by Becky, died of a heart valve problem and that he had nothing to do with her death. And George, he acknowledged his role in a separate incident linked to Sarah Hartsfield, an apparent plot in which she allegedly pressured him to kill the new wife of one of her ex-husbands. The ex-husband detailed these allegations in an affidavit in support of a protection order against Hartsfield 2 years ago. In the interview, George tells Dateline that Hartsfield gave him a gun. She gives him a gun, but that he had no intention of actually going through with this killing. And in a text message to Dateline, while he was in jail, while she was in jail, Hartsfield denies the allegations and said she never gave him any type of gun. But there's just no clear answers about Becky Kuntz's death. Now, again, it could have nothing to do with it. I'm just sharing it because it's also linked. But again, this is all alleged. I'm just sharing what's around her. But did she poison her fifth husband? In due time, we will find out. Until next time, my friends, be careful, be safe, be alert, be aware. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Peace.